There was a moment in my life where people with more power and authority than me told me the rules no longer applied to me, and I actually believed them. Not because I was stupid, not because I was weak, but because the pressure in my life was enormous, and the relief of believing this was immediate. I told myself a story that made me feel like the exception to this rule. I rationalized, I justified, and I minimized it. This is the exact psychological sequence playing out in the world right now, in front of billions and billions of people. Not a soccer story. It's not a political story. This is the story about the psychology of corruption. And it is the exact same psychology that keeps people stuck in narcissism, in addiction, and in other destructive mental health patterns. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Here's a little timeline of what happened. We want to pay attention to the sequence because that gives us insight into the underlying mechanisms of what's going on. So on July 1st, a forward from the U.S. men's national team got a red card versus Bosnia, which means automatic suspension. He was sent off. It was an obvious red card. Under FIFA's own rules, they write the rules, they enforce the rules. This applies to every person, every team, every match. A red card is an automatic one-game suspension. No appeal. That's not a gray area. It's written in black and white in their disciplinary code in the 2026 World Cup regulations. Then, of course, in comes Donald Trump, the President of the United States. He calls the FIFA President and asks him to review it. Trump confirmed the call himself. I asked for a review, he says, because I didn't think it was a foul. And FIFA, for the first time since 1962, let a player serve no suspension for a World Cup red card. Now watch how they did it. They didn't say the red card was wrong. They reached into their own code for a provision called Article 27 that lets them suspend the punishment and put the player on probation instead. So the card stands, but the suspension doesn't. They fine the U.S. Federation for the foul, and off goes the player onto the field. The Europeans, of course, complained, or the Belgians in particular, that FIFA crossed the line. In their words, unprecedented and incomprehensible and unjustifiable. Here's the part that makes this unbearingly so difficult to accept and very human. That this player played and the U.S. lost anyway. They bent the rules, they paid to bend it, and that didn't save them. FIFA didn't pretend it was unclear. They didn't say there was no evidence. They said that this situation is different, that the normal rules don't apply here. There's too much at stake. Hold on to that phrase because I've heard it before and I've said it before. This situation is different. The normal rules don't apply here. There's too much at stake. That's not strategic thinking. That's not leadership. That's the addict's brain. And this week, it ran the most powerful sports organization on earth. When this story came out, it's so easy to get into outrage and disbelief and condemnation and all of that. Then, for me, the reminder that I am capable of corruption, that people do this all the time. Outrage is easy. Taking responsibility for your own corruption is not. This is not a story about bad, corrupt people. FIFA is not uniquely corrupt here. They are not cartoon villains. This is what happens when our psychology drives deceptive, manipulative behavior. Rationalization, enabling, relief-seeking, running away without accountability or responsibility. Here's an important question. How does an institution that's been publicly disgraced, fined, investigated, and embarrassed on the world stage for decades, how does it keep doing the same thing over and over and keep getting away with it? The answer isn't corruption. Again, it's a personality trait. It's a pattern, a deeply human and familiar pattern. This isn't a lecture. Again, this is a reminder that there's a reality out there where we are all hiding from or lying to ourselves about. It's the same pattern that kept me as an addict for years and years and years. We're going to talk about what that pattern actually is. There are three mechanisms at work here. And let's go through each one. Again, not as a lecture, but as a learning exercise and a reflection exercise. Because when you can name it and see it coming, you can change it. First is rationalization. It's the brain's ability to build a completely convincing, justification for a decision it already made emotionally. It's not rocket science, but we have to understand what it is. FIFA didn't think their way into reversing this ban. They felt pressure, they made a decision, then they built a story around it. That's not reasoning, that's post hoc rationalization. And everyone who has ever struggled with addiction or any shameful behavior they don't want to admit knows exactly what that feels like, because we are world-class rationalizers. We have to be. The alternative is sitting with the discomfort of knowing what we've already done and accepting our unbearable shortcomings. Second mechanism here is enabling. And let's be careful here. Enabling is not weakness. It's not stupidity. Enabling is the completely logical response to short-term pain. FIFA felt enormous pressure, financial, political, the pressure of hosting this tournament in front of the world, and they made the pain stop immediately. That's what enabling does. It solves the problem right in front of you, and it guarantees a much bigger one later. But later isn't now, and right now is the only thing a brain in crisis mode can process. The third mechanism is what psychologists call moral disengagement. It's the process by which people and institutions disengage from their own ethical standards by reframing what they did. We didn't break the rules, we clarified them. We didn't interfere with the process, we ensured fairness. We didn't cave to pressure, we made a difficult decision. Behavior stays the same, the story around it changes. And that story, that reframing, is what lets the person or institution wake up the next morning and still believe they're the good ones. And you don't have to take my word for how this sounds, because FIFA said it out loud. When the FIFA president was asked about that phone call, he didn't say, "I intervened." He said he regularly speaks with heads of state, that the review was handled by independent bodies, and that he did not interfere. He made the call. The punishment vanished, and the story became, "I didn't interfere." FIFA itself called suspending the red card a much more balanced measure and said reviewing red cards is nothing new. The act was extraordinary. The first time in 64 years. The story is, this is normal. That gap between what was done and the story about what happened actually is the moral disengagement, and it is the most human thing in the world. I know this move. I've made this move. We trade the pain, the anguish, and the suffering for a moment's release from the torment of being ourselves. We cave to power, and then we tell a story about why it was the right thing to do. Any of this is landing with you. If you're seeing the connection between what FIFA did this week and the patterns that you recognize in your own life or in the lives of the people you love, share this with someone who you think might find it helpful. Honestly, that's the most useful thing we can do, is apply it to ourselves, to our lives, and help others see it too. Here's one thing specific from my own experience in my life. And I've talked about it before, where I had rules for myself, clear rules that I believed in. And when I broke them, I didn't experience it as breaking them. I experienced it as making a necessary exception given the circumstances. And here's the problem. The circumstances were always real. The pressure was always real. The justification had some truth in it. That's what makes this so insidious. The story you tell yourself is never completely made up. It's always about 20% true, and you use that 20% to carry the 100% of the weight. I ran, I hid, and I self-medicated, and every single time there was a reason, a legitimate, defensible, completely understandable reason. FIFA had a reason, I had a reason, you have a reason. So I want to ask you something directly, and I want you to sit with it rather than answer it right away. Where in your life are you FIFA right now? Where are you bending your own rules because someone with more power applied pressure, or because holding the line felt too costly to bear? Where are you building a story around a decision you already made and calling that story good judgment? This isn't an accusation, it's an invitation, because the thing you think is helping you is often the thing making it worse. And there's a part of you that already knows that. I'm not pretending the pressure isn't real. I'm not telling you it's simple. I spent years learning the difference between an exception and a pattern. And that difference is not always obvious from the inside. But here's what I know. The moment you can name the pattern, the moment you can watch FIFA reverse the band and say, I have done that in my own life, in my own way, that moment is not a moment of shame. That's the beginning of clarity, of honesty, maybe of being honest for the very first time. The psychologist Kristin Neff has spent her career studying self-compassion, and one of the core parts of her framework is what she calls common humanity. The recognition that suffering, struggle, failure, and moral compromise are not signs that you are uniquely broken. They are signs that you are human. FIFA is not uniquely evil. They're a human institution running a very human program. The same program that runs in families, in workplaces, in governments, and in individuals. At 3 in the morning when the justification feels absolutely airtight. The difference between corruption and recovery at any scale is not character, it's not willpower, it's not moral strength. It's whether anyone is willing to name the pattern. The exception almost never delivers what it promises. It just quiets the alarm for one more night. Recovery, personal, institutional, it all begins at the same moment. The moment the exception gets called what it actually is. Not as a verdict, not as a condemnation, as a pattern, a recognizable, nameable, interruptible pattern, because patterns can be interrupted. That's not optimism, that's neuroscience. The clouds do part. I'm not the only one with evidence that it passes, that things get better, but it starts with telling the truth about what's actually happening. FIFA isn't there yet. That's their journey, but you can be there right now, today. That's what this channel is all about. That's what this work is about. Cutting through the noise, cutting through the rationalizations, the justifications, the minimizations, and the convincing stories that we tell ourselves, and finding the truth sitting underneath it all. If any of this resonated with you, if you recognized yourself somewhere in this FIFA story, not because you're corrupt, but because you're a human being, please share this with someone. Please subscribe, like this video. I wish you all the very best. Take it easy. Peace out. I am very grateful that you watched to the end of this video. Please click one of the boxes to watch more of our content, and otherwise have a great day. Peace out.